when I read Throne of the Crescent Moon and Happy King, I found some similarities, not just because they're both fantasy and possibly epic fantasy,
and supremely well written, of course.
Yes. Of course, and because they're supremely well written, and both authors are incredibly attractive.
Oh yeah, yeah, of course, yeah. As it happens.
But I thought it was very interesting, even though the main character in each of the books has not the same age, but for example, in Half a King, we have Jarvie, which is a young character, and in Throne, we have Rashid, who is the second most important character, I would say, who's a youngster also, who's is in the process of learning. And I thought for that, as you mentioned before, it could appeal to a younger audience. And I thought both of them are kind of examples of the Bildungsroman, the initiation kind of novel. So I want you to comment on that. I know for you, Joe, you wrote it from it's the main character. For you, it's not the main character. But I wanted you to comment the importance of this initiation in the novel.
Well, in Half a King, I suppose the idea was very much... sorry, am I talking to the camera?
Yes.
I'll talk to the camera. In Half a King, the idea was very much to write a novel that was partly aimed at younger readers. And I think young adult fiction has become a very wide canvas. There's all kinds of work in there, all kinds of different genres and types. But one thing you really have to have in a young adult book is a young adult protagonist. I'd written a lot of quite used up, old, world-weary, cynical characters, autobiographical, I suppose you could say. During my career, my adult books tend to feature a lot of those types of characters. So I was quite interested in trying a character who's almost unformed, who's coming of age, who's finding out about the world, who's perhaps a little cloistered. And it was quite an interesting experience for me when you write a book that is from the point of view of a character that age of 16 years old or so, inevitably there's a kind of coming of age quality to it. And this particular character goes through quite an ordeal and has to find his own ways of negotiating very dangerous and tough situations, and hopefully to learn his own route to adulthood and take responsibility for his own life. So I think that's a kind of a very classic story, and one we're always interested in hearing again, with slightly new furniture, with a new type of character, a new angle. And so it was really just in the same way as the first law had been my take on epic fantasy, I guess Half a King is really my take on that coming of age tale.
Yeah, for me it's interesting because tonally, Throne of the Crescent Moon could easily be a young adult novel, except for the fact that the main character is an old man. And almost everything else about the book could fit very neatly into the idea of the subgenre of young adult fantasy. So Rashid, who is the main character's assistant, his partner, he's kind of the second character in terms of the amount of page time he gets. And he is a young man in his teens, just kind of very cloistered. He literally was cloistered, grew up in a monastic order, and is just coming of age, and in this city full of, to his eyes, sin and decadence and all of this, and he's sort of starting to wrangle with his sexuality, starting to wrangle with all of these things that he didn't have to face growing up in this kind of warrior monk monastery. And but for me, it was having him in there was almost a subversion, because traditionally he would be the main character. You know, this young man would be the focus of the story, and my main character, Abdullah, would be the kind of advising wizard, right?
The curmudgeonly mentor
figure. Yes,
yeah,
exactly. And instead, my aim was to focus on the old wizard who's seen a lot, and to then have this other character there to kind of provide a counterpoint to his, as you're saying, his kind of world-weary, bitter, tired voice. And there are a couple characters who serve that function. Zamia is another one, right? But it was the buildings romance. I kind of very pointedly was not making this book that, and so it's sort of like there's this character from a buildings romance fantasy who happens to be in this other sort of story, and so it's true that like in another world, Rashid would be the main character of his own book, right? But this is not the story that I wanted.